Saga I'm in Love. Today I'm in love with special guest Neil Cohen, who is a playwright, journalist, and screenwriter who has written for many national publications as well as HBO, Fox, Paramount, and Disney. And Neil and I met at Film Independent, where I first heard the story of his current film and his directorial debut, which we'll dive into later. So tell us the story of Chief Zabu, your current film, and why it has just been revived or revisited, and what happened there.
So 30 years ago, a friend of mine and I made a movie. I was working as a talent agent at the time.
Oh, really?
And a fella came in who was a producer and an actor, a guy named Zach Norman, who people might remember him from Romancing the Stone and Cadillac Man. He was also on The Nanny, but he was also an entrepreneur, and he raised the money for a very famous documentary called Hearts and Minds, which was an anti-Vietnam War documentary that won the Academy Award in 1974.
All right.
And he was producing a movie for Robert Downey Sr.
Interesting.
What a lot of people don't know is Robert Downey had a father who made the most bizarre underground movies in the 60s with titles like Greaser's Palace, about a guy in a zoot suit who's Jesus Christ who lands in a western town in a yellow zoot suit.
Okay.
And he made a movie called Putney Swope, and this was Robert Downey's father.
Okay.
So they came to the office because they wanted to hire a couple of actors that I represented.
Oh, interesting.
And by the end of our meeting, we had made our deal, and this guy, Zach Norman, said to me, you seem like a very unhappy person.
Oh. Wow.
And I said, I really am. He said, well, if you could do anything in life, what would you want to do? I said, I'd like to make a living as a writer. He said, well, give me something to read. So I gave him a script, and he read the script, and he called me up. He said, okay, you come work for me, quit your job, come work for me, and I'll pay you $200 a week, and we'll write a script together. And he told me a story about having recently been invited to a party at the Sherry Netherlands Hotel, which is one of the three very famous hotels. There was the Plaza, the Sherry Netherland, and the Pierre, all on 5th Avenue and 59th Street.
Okay.
And in the Sherry Netherland Hotel were all these famous actresses. It was Elizabeth Taylor, Warren Beatty was there, and all these businessmen were there surrounding a guy named Chief Zabu, who was from a new country in Africa, who was coming to New York to try to get the UN to recognize his country.
Okay.
And the businessmen said to my friend, it's not mergers and acquisitions. If you want to make money, the name of the game today is countries. So they were going to support this guy in getting his independence and recognition. Unfortunately, the guy was assassinated. So he told me this story, and I said, well, it kind of sounds like a comedy to me if the guy doesn't get assassinated.
That's so funny. I found that very interesting that your mind goes there. Though,
yeah,
you know?
And I said, but let's take it out of Namibia, which was involved in all kinds of not very pleasant situations, and let's set it in Polynesia, where we'll have the countries were getting independence from France at that point, the different islands, but at the same time, France was still testing nuclear weapons in Polynesia in the open air.
Oh, okay.
So I said, well, we'll do the comedy about the guy, but we're not going to do a comedy with a guy with a bone in his nose and a grass skirt. The guy's going to be in a business suit and a college-educated guy, but there's going to be this dark undertow of atomic testing.
Yeah.
That said, let's do a crazy comedy about all these businessmen who think they're going to get involved in international politics.
And so, what happened there? Why?
Well, we made a
movie. Until 30
movie.
years?
Right. Well, we were very ambitious in the script, and we were very ambitious in what kind of movie we were going to make, but we had no money. But we didn't know if you had no money, you're not supposed to make a movie with 40 speaking roles, 28 locations, that takes place supposedly in 3 cities and 2 continents. At that point, I had got my first studio writing job, and Zach was now getting cast in A movies, and we said, you know, let's just put this aside and we'll get back to it.
Okay.
And we never got back to it. 30 years later,
Yeah.
about a year ago, it was in November, we're having dinner and talking about this guy, Donald Trump. And we say, you know, maybe we should look at this Chief Zabu again, because it's about a New York real estate guy who dreams of having political influence. So we look at the movie and we realize that now we're 30 years smarter and 30 years more mature and 30 years more distant. And we say, you have to find the original negative.
Yeah, exactly.
We look at each other like,
We
we don't know what the original negative is. I mean, we know we don't have any outtakes, we don't have any sound, we don't have anything.
Oh, wow.
So this guy has moved many times, and in each move, less stuff was left behind.
This is your
My partner, yeah, co-director, Zach. And in his house in Burbank, we go into the basement under the stairs and tear apart the place. And under boxes of old tax records and laundry, we find the negative. Now we take the negative to a lab in Burbank, like a famous fancy lab, and we say, can you transfer this to digital? And they give us this price that we can't possibly afford.
Oh, really?
And we say, but you don't understand. We're first-time, low-budget indie filmmakers, even if we're together 141 years old. And this cracks up the guy, and he says, you know, you're right, I'll give you the student rate.
I wonder if just taking a lot of time away from it and it wasn't as precious and fresh to you
Absolutely.
guys allowed you to, even if that scene did take all day or did, you know, cost the most, being able to toss it because it wasn't as precious anymore.
Well, we were doing a thing, nothing was precious. It just became very analytical. It was like we were looking backwards through a telescope. Now, when we shot this, one of the only ways we could afford to shoot it was we were crazy and we shot it in 35 millimeters. So I think for when people go to see it, there may be a strange aspect, because nowadays people aren't used to seeing grain on a screen. And when it gets blown up, you see the grain of what was on the actual film. But in order for us to afford it, we had to use a thing called short ends. And what short ends are is when they shoot the studio movies, on the reels, they have little pieces left over at the end, and they know the next shot is going to be a 2-minute shot, so you don't want a 30-second piece or a 45-second piece. So they would actually clip off those pieces of the reel and get credit for it back at the lab, because the lab would use it as leader on the front of reels or at the back of reels, but the lab would also sell those short ends to independent filmmakers and student filmmakers. So we shot the whole thing with short ends.
You did?
And the short ends also are all coming from different batches of films, so they all have slightly. So sometimes we would have 45 seconds and we'd have to reload the camera. Sometimes we would have 2 minutes and then we'd have to reload the camera.
If you could go back and change one thing about the steps you've taken, what would it be? Is there anything
Well, part of it goes back to me being a kid and getting the wrong message that the business was easy. And thinking it was easy, I was resentful when it wasn't easy.
Interesting, yeah.
And it wasn't a question of becoming one of these deranged careerist person, but if I had dialed it up a few more notches, not that being competitive, just taking serious what the competition is and how much competition it is, and how people who are perhaps less talented, if they're more aggressive, they're going to get ahead of you. And by being aggressive, that doesn't mean knocking you out of the way with sharp elbows, but it means if you get a little gig, make the best out of the gig. Don't treat it like an unworthy gig or beneath you. Just take everything really, really seriously that you're doing. And, you know, I'm just being honest, I know many times where I took it seriously to a point. But was I giving 100%? No.
Did you say there was also something with the Sundance Lab or something that
Well, the people at Slam Dance have been very nice and very supportive and think it's a great story, and they've been sending out tweets about us and about our opening. The people at Vidiot's in Santa Monica, the world's largest archive of film, and they're having a Kickstarter, you may want to support them too, have been and made us the spotlighted movie of the month. So what we're trying to do is just build up a bunch of support, and our expectation is to just have a lot of fun. And after this opening, which is kind of a test, we hope to reopen it in LA after the first of the year for a longer run, and move it around the country to art house theaters and show it to people who might get a kick out of it.
Very cool. So, if you are in the LA area, October 28th, it's next Friday.
Yes, it is. It's absolutely next Friday.
So October 28th, it's next Friday, and if you're in the LA area, gotta check it out.
Come by and say hello.